Alright, strap in because this story's got everything. A messy divorce, a secret plan to manipulate a kid into taking the fall for murder, and oh yeah, some jailhouse calls that are so stupid. You'd swear it was an episode of World's Dumbest Criminals, but spoiler alert, it's real, and way darker than you'd expect. This is the case of Joseph Paul DeWise, a man accused of walking into his estranged wife's new home, murdering her, shooting her roommate, and then wait for it, trying to pin the whole thing on his own teenage son. Yeah, let that sink in. The crime scene? A quiet neighborhood in Belgrade, Montana. The timeline? The 7th of January, 2024. The motive? Allegedly, control, jealousy, and a boiling rage that had been simmering ever since his wife Lauren finally decided to leave him for good. And trust me, once she left, it didn't take long for things to go nuclear. But what makes this case wild isn't just the violence, it's what happened after. The lies, the manipulation, the jailhouse phone calls. And the part where Joseph basically tells his daughter to get her little brother to confess to a double shooting, as if that's a totally normal family favor. So yeah, this one's messed up. But it's also a cautionary tale about obsession, control, and how far someone will go when they can't stand losing power. Let's get into it. Welcome to Mystery Unveiled. Thank you, my viewers. A special thank you to our loyal subscribers for joining us as we uncover the darkest, most gripping true crime stories every single day. Your support fuels our mission to bring you both infamous cases and chilling untold mysteries. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. So, here's where we start, with the illusion of a normal family. Joseph Paul DeWise friends and family just called him Paul was 47 years old. A father, a husband, at least until that last part started to fall apart. His wife, Lauren DeWise, 35 years old, was finally breaking away. After what friends described as years of emotional abuse and escalating control, she packed up her things, left their shared home, and moved out to Belgrade, Montana, to start over. Now, let me be clear, this wasn't just a casual separation. According to charging documents and witness statements, Lauren wasn't just leaving a marriage, was escaping it. Coworkers said Paul had a pattern of controlling behavior. Friends claimed Lauren was scared of what he might do once she left. And that fear? Yeah, it wasn't unfounded. But Lauren didn't go alone. She moved in with a friend, Ashley Van Hemert, 32 years old. By all accounts, Ashley was supportive, protective, and one of the few people Lauren could count on during a really dark time. The two of them shared a home on 1306 Idaho Street, and for a little while, it actually looked like Lauren was going to be okay. Then came the 7th of January. It was early morning, just past sunrise, when police were called to the house. What they found inside was straight up horrifying. Lauren was dead. Shot multiple times. Ashley? Still alive. Barely. She'd been critically injured and was rushed to the hospital. The scene was chaotic. No signs of a break-in, no robbery. Just two women gunned down in what looked like an execution-style shooting. And guess who was immediately on the radar? Yep, Paul. But here's where it gets tricky. Because when police showed up at his house, Paul was calm. Too calm. He claimed he had nothing to do with it. Said he'd been home all night with his 3 kids. A 17-year-old daughter, a 4-year-old little girl, and a 15-year-old son. All of them, according to him, were in bed. No one went anywhere. The timeline didn't match up, he said. Case closed. Except it wasn't. Investigators weren't buying it, and neither were the people who knew Paul best. Interviews with Lauren's friends painted a disturbing picture of a man who couldn't stand losing control of the woman he once controlled. A man who, some feared, might have been capable of something horrific. So the police kept digging. And then boom, major break in the case. Paul's 15-year-old son came forward. After several interviews with police, he finally cracked. And what he told investigators? It blew the case wide open. He said he was there the night of the shooting. That he went with his dad to Lauren's house. That he stayed downstairs while his father went upstairs. And then gunshots. He said he heard the shots. That when his dad came back down, they left the house and went home like nothing happened. This, of course, completely nuked Paul's original alibi. Now, investigators had 2 things. A witness placing him at the scene, and a motive built on abuse and obsession. Paul was arrested. He was charged with deliberate homicide for Lauren's death, and attempted deliberate homicide for shooting Ashley. And, yeah, in case you're wondering, those are charges that can land you in prison for life twice over. You'd think it ends there, right? Oh no, we're just getting started. Because once Paul was sitting in a jail cell, waiting for his trial, he made a huge mistake, like the kind of mistake you only make if you think your jail phone calls aren't being recorded. Spoiler, they are, always. So, Now we've got Paul sitting in jail, charged with shooting his estranged wife and nearly killing her roommate. You'd think that would be the point where most people shut up, lawyer up, and wait for trial. But not Paul. Nah, Paul decided to talk. A lot. From jail. On a phone line that literally everyone knows is recorded. And what he said? Let's just say it didn't exactly help his case. Here's the deal. On the 6th of February, Judge Holly Brown laid down a crystal clear court order no contact with any witnesses in the case. And that included his own kids. Yep, all of them. The 17-year-old daughter, the little 4-year-old, and the 15-year-old son. Especially the 15-year-old son. You know the one who just told police, "Yeah, I was there when Dad shot 2 people." So what does Paul do? The next day, the 7th of February, he gets on the phone from Gallatin County Detention Center and calls his 17-year-old daughter. And not just to say, "I love you," or "How are the kids holding up?" Oh no. This was a whole-ass strategy session. The call was recorded. It was transcribed. And when prosecutors got their hands on it, boom, new felony charge, tampering with witnesses. Here's what Paul said. It's real important that he admit it, because if he admits it, then I get the expletive out of here. Understand? Yep. You heard that right. Paul wanted his daughter to convince his son, a 15-year-old kiddo, confessed to a double shooting that, by all accounts, Paul committed. His daughter answered, "Yeah." That's when Paul went full-blown conspiracy mode. He starts laying out his theory of how the son could have done it instead. Like, it was already decided, he just needs to get the kid on board with the story. He says, "It looks to me like JD went, and he made 2 trips. Looks like he wore his boots one time and he wore mine another time. That's what it looks like to me." Okay. So now he's trying to say his son snuck out while seeing 2 different pairs of boots, shot 2 women, and then, what? Came home and just went to sleep like nothing happened? This isn't just desperate, it's straight up delusional. But it gets worse. Paul tries to make the whole thing sound like it's no big deal. Like getting his teenage son to take the fall for murder is just a minor inconvenience. He actually tells his daughter, "The jail here is safe. The food's good. He'll only be in until he's 21. Are you kidding me?" Like, oh, cool. Just sacrifice your teenage son to the system, send him to juvie, and call it a day. It's almost like Paul thought this was a game. And then, as if that wasn't already enough to earn him Father of the Year, he drops this gem. We'll take care of him. I hope that if it was JD, that he steps up. So we get our family back together. Do you think there's a chance of that? You know what his daughter says? I don't know. Maybe. So, now it's not just Paul being reckless, it's a full-blown family crisis. The daughter's caught in the middle. The son's already given a statement. And Paul's over here trying to engineer an alibi out of thin air using his own kids as pawns. This wasn't just witness tampering. It was next-level manipulation, and it showed exactly who Paul really was when the mask came off. After the phone call was discovered, prosecutors wasted 0 time. Eric Kitzmiller, the chief deputy attorney for Gallatin County, filed new charges, tampering with witnesses. A felony that could tack on another 10 years to Paul's already massive stack of legal problems. At the hearing on the 19th of April, Paul pleaded not guilty to the new charge. His attorney, Alex Jacoby, stood beside him, probably wondering what fresh disaster his client would unleash next. Judge John Brown, different judge this time, wasn't playing around either. He slapped Paul with another $1 million bail. But don't worry, it's not like Paul was going anywhere. He was already sitting on a $1 million bond for the homicide case. And just to make it official, Judge Brown reminded him, no contact with any witnesses, period. That includes family, kids, everyone. Meanwhile, prosecutors are gearing up for the big show, because if this case goes to trial, they've got more than just physical evidence now. They've got a motive, a witness, and recorded proof that the accused was trying to cover his tracks by pinning the crime on a literal child. Because you've got to ask yourself, what kind of father tries to throw his own kid under the bus for murder? What kind of man facing life in prison chooses to protect himself over his family? Paul wasn't just accused of being a killer. He was acting like a narcissist on a sinking ship, shoving everyone overboard just to keep himself afloat a little longer. And what's worse? He seemed to believe it would actually work. That the son would confess, that the daughter would help, that the courts would believe it. It's the kind of twisted logic that only happens when someone is so desperate to stay in control that they'll burn everything and everyone down with them. So what happened next? Did the son stick to his story? Did Paul manage to convince anyone that he wasn't the one who pulled the trigger? And what did the courtroom reveal about the real story behind this family tragedy? We're just getting started. So Paul's in jail, running his mouth, racking up new charges, and trying to Jedi mind trick his kid into confessing to double homicide. But what about the son? Let's talk about JD, the 15-year-old who went from being a potential witness to the centerpiece of Paul's wild alternate reality theory. And trust me, what this kid says, it blows the whole case wide open. After the shooting, Paul told police he was at home all night with his kids. Sounds simple, right? But investigators weren't buying it. Something felt off. And when they sat down with the Sonlets, just say things escalated quickly. In his first interview, JD tries to back up his dad's story. "We were home watching movies," he says. "Dad never left. We all went to bed." But there's hesitation in his voice. Nervous pauses. A kid clearly trying to hold on to something, but it's slipping. Detectives keep pressing, gently but persistently. "Are you sure? Think about what happened. Think about what time you went to sleep. Was your dad in the house the whole night?" JD gets quiet. And then it happens. In a later interview, JD drops the bomb. "I went with my dad to the house that night. I stayed downstairs. I heard the shots." Just like that, boom, Paul's alibi evaporates. His own son, the one he was trying to manipulate into taking the blame, just confirmed he was there the night of the shooting. He doesn't say he did it. In fact, he specifically says he didn't. "I was downstairs the whole time. Then I heard gunshots. Then we left." He also says Paul didn't say a word during the ride home. Just cold silence. Like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just shot the mother of his children and tried to kill another woman. And if you're still wondering how reliable that is, keep in mind this wasn't just interview. It took multiple sessions for JD to come clean, each one peeling back a layer. That's not the behavior of a kid making stuff up. That's trauma, guilt, and pressure all boiling over. Now here's the kicker. The forensics matched what JD said. Investigators found footprints in and around the house, some matching Paul's boots. Others, well, they looked a little smaller. Remember Paul's comment from jail? "Looks like he wore his boots one time and mine another time." Yeah, police noticed that too. But rather than proving the son did it, it actually made Paul look worse. Because the boots matching JD were found in Paul's truck, meaning Paul brought them, possibly to stage something, maybe even to frame his own son. It was a full-on red flag, a premeditated alibi setup, gone completely sideways. So now we've got Paul with no alibi, phone calls from jail trying to rig witness statements, and his own son saying, "Yeah, I was there. I heard the shots. My dad did it." You'd think at that point the defense would cut their losses, plea out, save what's left of his dignity, but no. At a pretrial hearing, Paul's lawyer actually tries to argue that the son's statement can't be trusted because he changed it over time. Never mind that trauma survivors always revise their stories as they work through what happened. Then, just when things can't get any weirder, Paul files a motion to modify his bail conditions. And get this, she wants to be allowed to talk to his daughter again. You know, the same daughter he already tried to use as a go-between in his jailhouse confession scheme. Unsurprisingly, prosecutor Eric Kitzmiller is like, "Absolutely not." He tells the court, "This man has already violated a court order and tried to manipulate a minor witness. Granting him contact would be insane." Judge Holly Brown agrees. Motion denied. At this point, the case is stacked. Motive? Check. Paul was abusive. Lauren left him. He hated losing control. Opportunity? Check. He was in the house. JD says so. Means? Yep. Gun recovered. Ballistics confirmed. Cover-up attempt? Oh yeah. Those jail calls were a goldmine. The prosecution even brought in digital forensics to show that Paul's cell phone pinged near the crime scene during the time of the murders. And his vehicle? Captured on a neighborhood doorbell cam rolling into the area just before the gunshots were reported, Paul's narrative is crumbling by the second. Let's talk about the human side of this for a second. The real victims here weren't just Lauren and Ashley, it was the kids, all three of them. Especially JD, who now has to live with the knowledge that his father tried to frame him for murder. This wasn't just a tragic shooting, it was a family betrayal on every level. Their mom was killed, their home life exploded, and their dad, he didn't protect them, he tried to sacrifice them. At court hearings, family members sat in stunned silence. Some refused to even look at Paul. Others sobbed quietly when JD gave testimony behind closed doors. And the judge? She ordered strict protective measures for the kids, including keeping their names out of the press and making sure they had access to therapy. The courtroom's quiet. Tense. People shifting in their seats, eyes locked on one man, Joseph Paul DeWise, the guy who just a few months ago was a husband, a father, and to the outside world, maybe just a regular middle-aged dude. But today, he's the main character in a murder trial with stakes so high, 2 life sentences hang in the balance. Let's break it down. Gallatin County District Court packs in 14 potential jurors, all local. Most have heard of the case, but they promise to be fair. The prosecution? They want people who understand emotional manipulation. People who won't flinch when a kid takes the stand. The defense? They want doubters. People who believe in redemption. maybe even someone who's been through a messy divorce themselves. Each side picks their battlefield carefully, and once the jury is sworn in, the trial finally begins. Prosecutor Eric Kitzmiller steps up first. Calm, collected. He lays it out in cold, brutal terms. This case is about control, manipulation, and violence. Joseph Paul DeWise murdered his wife and tried to kill her friend because he couldn't stand the idea of losing power. He doesn't overhype. He doesn't dramatize. He just promises the jury one thing, evidence that will speak for itself. Then, the defense gets up. Paul's lawyer, Alex Jacoby, has a tougher job. He paints Paul as a man falsely accused, demonized, and misunderstood. He hints that JD's testimony was coerced and reminds the jury that there's no video of the actual crime. It's a desperate move, but hey, what else can they do? They explain how the bullets match the weapon found in Paul's possession. The gunshot residue? All over Paul's jacket. The boot prints in the snow? One pair matching Paul's, another matching his son's. But the location and pattern suggest the smaller prints were planted, not worn into the crime scene naturally. Then comes the digital evidence expert. Cell tower data places Paul's phone within a few blocks of the crime scene at the time of the shooting. Security footage from a neighbor's camera shows a vehicle matching Paul's truck driving down Idaho Street shortly before the shots were fired. That's when the energy in the courtroom starts to shift. Jurors begin glancing at each other, eyebrows raised, notes scribbled. The case is building momentum. Paul's 17-year-old daughter. Her testimony is brutal to watch. She confirms the jailhouse call. Says Paul told her exactly what prosecutors claimed, that he wanted JD to take the fall so he could go free. She cries. A lot. But she never falters. He said, "If my brother admitted to it, then everything would be okay." He said the jail food was good. He said we could fix everything. Her voice cracks, but she looks straight at the jury. No fear, no lies. Just the raw pain of a teenager, realizing her father was willing to destroy her brother's life. Courtroom dead silent, as JD walks in. He's only 15, smaller than everyone expected. But when he opens his mouth, you can hear the weight of everything he's been through. He tells the story. He was with Paul that night. They drove to the house. He stayed in the basement, heard shouting, then gunshots. Paul came back downstairs, calm, like nothing happened. We drove home. He didn't say anything, just turned up the radio, and when the defense tries to shake him, they fail. Yes, he changed his story at first. Yes, he was scared, but now he's solid. I lied before because I was scared of my dad, but I'm not scared anymore. It's the kind of testimony that sticks, not because it's flashy, but because it's real. So what does the defense have? Not much. They call a psychologist to suggest Paul was under intense emotional distress, that he had mental health issues. But the prosecution fires back. So being angry makes it okay to shoot someone? To try to frame your child? They also try to poke holes in the timeline. But with the cell data, the video evidence, the physical proof, the puzzle's already complete, there's nothing left to guess. Kitzmiller goes last, and he brings the hammer down hard. Joseph Paul DeWise didn't just murder Lauren. He didn't just try to kill Ashley. He tried to destroy his own family, to cover it up. He reminds the jury of the evidence, the gun, the boots, the jail call, the daughter, the son, and he ends with this. This isn't just a case about murder. This is about a man who thought he could lie, manipulate, and bully his way out of justice. Don't let him win. The courtroom goes silent. It takes the jury just 4 hours. They come back, guilty of deliberate homicide, guilty of attempted deliberate homicide, guilty of tampering with a witness. Paul barely reacts. No tears, no outburst, just a blank stare into nowhere. When the judge announces sentencing, it's as heavy as expected. 2 life sentences plus 30 years. No possibility of parole. Justice doesn't always feel clean. But this time, it felt right. Ashley Van Hemert survived. Physically at least. But the emotional trauma? That's lifelong. Lauren's family mourned quietly, avoiding the media spotlight. Her children were placed in protective care, supported by extended relatives and therapists. JD, the boy Paul tried to destroy, became a symbol of strength. Not because he was fearless, but because he spoke through the fear. As for Paul, he's still behind bars, still trying to appeal, still refusing to admit what he did. But the truth is out now, and no jail call, no manipulation, no twisted father-son cover story can ever change that. Before the gunshots, before the trial, before a teenage boy was nearly forced to confess to a crime he didn't commit, there was Paul DeWise, just a man, a father, a husband, and on the surface, he looked like any other guy trying to make life work in Montana. But here's the thing about monsters. They don't start off that way. Let's rewind. Born in the mid-1970s, Joseph Paul DeWise, who most people just called Paul, grew up in a quiet, working-class town in the Midwest. No major criminal record, No shocking childhood trauma. Just a kid who was a little withdrawn, a little controlling, a little off. Friends from high school described him as charming but weird. One classmate said, "He was the kind of guy who'd laugh at a joke and then give you this stare like he was calculating something behind it. Not exactly your typical boy-next-door energy." As he got older, Paul became obsessed with order, with being in charge. His jobs were always in fields where he could dictate routine manufacturing, logistics, minor supervisory roles. He liked things this way, his way. Fast forward to his early 30s. That's when he meets Lauren Walder, a smart, independent woman 10 years younger, college-educated. A lover of the outdoors, photography, and working with at-risk youth. Their meeting wasn't exactly a rom-com, more like opposites attract, then combust. At first, Paul turned on the charm, the flowers, the attention, the "you're the only one who understands me" stuff. Lauren fell for it, hard. They got married, had kids, built a life, but within a few years, the cracks started to show. Lauren's friends noticed she started changing. She stopped posting on social media, stopped attending girls' nights, stopped talking about her goals. At first, people thought it was just motherhood stuff, new priorities, you know? But then came the whispers. Paul wouldn't let her have her own bank account. He tracked her phone. He insisted she ask before making any plans, even with family. When one friend confronted her about it, Lauren just smiled and said, "He just loves me a lot. It's not that big a deal." But it was. It was a big deal. The control didn't stop at finances or social life. According to court records and Lauren's co-workers, Paul regularly showed up unannounced at her work. He once slashed her car tires because she didn't answer her phone fast enough. And toward the end, he was sleeping in the living room with a shotgun next to him. Lauren tried to get help, quietly. She asked friends for couch space, called hotlines, spoke with a divorce attorney. But every step she took toward freedom, Paul took 2 steps to tighten the leash. In late 2023, Lauren made her move. She left, packed a few bags, took her kids, moved into a rental home in Belgrade, Montana with her friend and co-worker Ashley Van Hemert. To outsiders, it looked like a fresh start. But to Paul, it was a declaration of war. He started showing up outside the house, calling nonstop, sending messages like, "We're still a family. You don't get to just walk away." Lauren got a protective order. It didn't stop him. Ashley later told police that Paul once left dead flowers on the doorstep with a note that read, "This isn't over." And spoiler alert, it wasn't. Friends of Paul noticed the change. He stopped going to work, started drinking more, became obsessed with conspiracy theories, started ranting about how the courts are rigged against men. He told his neighbor once, "She's trying to ruin me. Take my kids, my house, my life." One coworker said Paul even asked him how to disable a security camera system, just hypothetically. Flags? Try red fireworks. Now, let's talk about the 7th of January, the night everything changed. According to prosecutors, Paul didn't just snap. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment thing. He planned it. He scoped out the house weeks before. He knew Ashley would be there. He brought the gun, the gloves, the backup clothes, and somehow he brought his 15-year-old son along. Why? Some think it was to use JD as an alibi. Others say he wanted to manipulate him into being the fall guy. Either way, it was evil, calculated, and 100% intentional. Let's not gloss over this. Paul brought his kid not to a camping trip, not to a baseball game, but to a murder scene. JD was downstairs when the shots were fired. He heard everything. And then he watched his dad get in the car like nothing happened. Like he'd just run an errand. Imagine being 15 years old and realizing your dad's a killer. Then imagine what it takes to testify against him. After Paul's arrest, Judge Holly Brown issued a strict no-contact order, especially with witnesses, including his own kids. But guess what? Paul broke it less than 24 hours later. He called his daughter from jail, told her to get JD to confess, said the food was pretty good in prison, that JD would only be in juvie until he's 21. Oh, and this gem, if he admits it, I get the F out of here. Just let that sink in. The man killed his wife, nearly killed her friend, dragged his son into it, and then tried to flip the script so he could walk away clean. So what kind of person does this? According to the psychologists who analyzed Paul during the trial, he showed signs of narcissistic personality disorder, traits of coercive control, a psychological form of domestic abuse where one partner dominates the other without ever lifting a hand, and a deep fear of abandonment, the kind that turns deadly when the person losing control starts to spiral. Paul wasn't the kind of guy to scream in public or throw punches. He was quiet, methodical, patient. But when he realized Lauren was never coming back, He didn't just lose his grip on reality, he weaponized it. When you look at Paul's mugshot, you see a middle-aged man with tired eyes. No horns, no blood, no classic villain features. But behind those eyes, a man who manipulated his kids, abused his wife, tried to erase anyone who challenged his power. And the scariest part? He almost got away with it. True crime stories always have that one name that lingers in your brain, but too often, it's the killer's. Let's change that. Because while Paul DeWise made headlines for what he did, Lauren DeWise deserves to be remembered for who she was. This isn't just about a tragedy. This is about a woman who fought like hell to reclaim her freedom, and whose story should have ended so differently. Lauren was born in 1988, raised in Washington State, in a small, mountain-backed town where hiking trails were more common than highways. She was the youngest of 3 sisters. The one who always carried a book in her hand and a fierce sense of justice in her heart. As a kid, she wanted to be a veterinarian, then a writer, then a social worker. She was that kind of person always thinking about how to help. In high school, she led the anti-bullying task force. In college, she interned at a shelter for abused women. Her professor said she didn't just want to get the degree, she wanted to change lives with it. Spoiler alert, she did. In her mid-20s, Lauren met Paul. Things were good at first. You know the story, flowers, long talks, shared dreams. They married in 2010, and by 2012, their first child arrived. Lauren loved being a mom. That's not just a lineage, it's what everyone said. She read bedtime stories in silly voices, packed notes in lunchboxes, taught her kids how to garden, encouraged questions, big feelings, imagination. But behind all that unconditional love, there was a growing weight, a partner who didn't support her, a home that didn't feel safe. And the more she gave to her children, the less space she had for herself. Still, she pushed on. Because moms do that. Friends noticed the changes first. Lauren, who used to show up for everything from PTA meetings to yoga classes, started disappearing. She made excuses, said she was just tired or busy at home. In reality, she was trapped. Paul had become controlling little things at first, then bigger ones. Monitoring her phone, checking her emails, questioning her every move. Lauren journaled about it, but kept it secret. She was scared. Scared of being judged, scared she wouldn't be believed, and most of all, scared of what Paul might do if she left. By mid-2023, Lauren had enough. She found an attorney, started secretly saving money. Reached out to an old friend, Ashley Van Hemert, her co-worker and roommate-to-be. They made a plan. Lauren rented a modest house in Belgrade. Got her kids into a new routine, filed for divorce. She even got a protective order against Paul. And for a moment, there was hope. The kids were laughing again. Lauren was smiling again. She told Ashley one night, "I feel like I can finally breathe. But sometimes, fresh air is the last thing a monster wants you to have." Let's take a second to talk about Ashley Van Hemert. She wasn't just Lauren's roommate. She was her safe space, her protector. They'd worked together for years, helping at-risk teens. Ashley had a calming energy, one of those solid people you want in your corner. She opened her home to Lauren and the kids without hesitation. And on the night of the 7th of January, she fought for them. Even after being shot critically wounded, Ashley managed to call for help. She survived. And because of that, she became the key to exposing what really happened that night. Lauren didn't survive the shooting. She died at the scene, in what should have been her sanctuary. When news broke, the community was devastated. Not just because of the murder, but because of who Lauren was. Vigils were held. Her co-workers set up a scholarship in her name for girls escaping domestic abuse. Her kids were placed with relatives. At the funeral, her sister said, she was fighting to build a better life. That fight ended, but her legacy won't. And it hasn't. Lauren wasn't a statistic. She wasn't just another victim. She was a mother, a sister, a fighter, a woman who tried to escape a cycle of abuse that too many women are trapped in. She deserved better. And her story matters because 1 in 4 women in the US will experience intimate partner violence. Every day, 3 women are killed by current or former partners. And in too many cases, those women did everything right and still paid the ultimate price. Lauren's story is a wake-up call, but more than that, it's a reminder of resilience. Because even in her final weeks, she chose hope, choose freedom, choose her kids. So yeah, you'll hear about Paul DeWise. His twisted logic, his manipulations, his trial. But remember this, Lauren DeWise was the one who mattered most. Say her name. Share her story. And next time someone tells you she should have just left, tell them she did. And he killed her anyway. The 7th of January, 2024. 2 gunshots tear through the silence in Belgrade, Montana. Inside that house on Idaho Street, one woman lies dead. Another, bleeding, barely conscious, but alive. And that second woman, Ashley Van Hemert? She's the reason we even have a case. When first responders arrived at 1306 Idaho Street, they didn't expect anyone to be breathing, but there she was. Ashley, 32 years old, on the floor, shot and slipping in and out of consciousness. She had lost a lot of blood, but somehow she held on. And as medics worked on her, she whispered one name. Paul. It was Paul. That one word started the entire investigation. Ashley wasn't just the roommate. She was a social worker, just like Lauren. They worked together helping foster kids transition out of group homes. She was known for being calm under pressure, warm, and ridiculously good at talking to teens that no one else could reach. Ashley had dreams of opening a nonprofit someday, maybe even writing a book on trauma and healing. But life had different plans. In late 2023, when Lauren was escaping her marriage, Ashley didn't hesitate. You and the kids come stay with me. No questions. That one decision nearly cost her life. In a later interview, Ashley described that night in haunting detail. She and Lauren had put the kids to bed. They were watching a documentary on the couch. Quiet, peaceful, then the door creaked. She heard footsteps. Saw Paul in the doorway. Before she could scream, the first shot hit Lauren. Ashley ran. She didn't even realize she'd been shot too. Adrenaline took over. She made it to the back hallway before collapsing. Her phone was in her hand. A whisper, a gasp, then darkness. Ashley flatlined once on the operating table, but the doctors at Bozeman Health brought her back. She spent 11 days in the ICU, 3 of them in a medically induced coma. The bullet fractured her pelvis and grazed her kidney. The physical pain was nothing compared to the grief. When she woke up and asked, "How's Lauren?" Doctors couldn't lie. Ashley broke down. It took 2 weeks before she was strong enough to talk to investigators. And when she did, she brought receipts. She told them Paul had been stalking Lauren. There were weird noises outside the house the week before. Lauren had mentioned him acting off, and even feared he'd try something drastic. Ashley's testimony sealed the case, and when Paul tried to lie saying he'd been home all night, Ashley's account demolished that narrative. When Ashley showed up to court for Paul's arraignment, people stared. Not because of the visible scars or the limp she still carried, but because of the steel in her eyes. She didn't testify that day, but her presence, it said everything. You could see Paul shift in his seat, look away, because he knew she survived. And now, she was coming for the truth. In the months that followed, Ashley did what most people couldn't. She turned her recovery into a platform. She started speaking at women's shelters, launched a blog on surviving domestic trauma, worked with Lauren's family to start the Lauren Strong Foundation, a nonprofit aimed at helping women leave abusive partners safely. One of her posts read, "I wasn't supposed to live, but I did. So now, I use every breath to make sure Lauren's death wasn't in vain." People called Ashley a real-life final girl. Others said she was braver than any of us. One commenter wrote, "This woman took a bullet for her best friend and lived to expose the monster. If that's not strength, I don't know what is." There were edits made in her honor. People started GoFundMe campaigns to help her with medical bills. She even went on a few podcasts raw, honest, and incredibly human. No drama, no sensationalism. Just truth. But let's not romanticize it. Ashley still deals with chronic pain. She suffers from PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks. She's had to move 3 times for safety. Changed her phone number. Cut off old friends who doubted her story. She carries survivor's guilt like a second skin. But despite all of that, she shows up every single day. Ashley Van Hemert didn't ask to be a hero. She didn't train for battle. But when death came knocking, she refused to answer the door quietly. She lived. She fought. And she spoke. And thanks to her, Paul DeWise's lies are crumbling. When true crime stories hit the headlines, people focus on the victims and the killers. But too often, we forget the ones stuck in between. The kids. In this case, 3 of them. 2.17 rupees and 4. And a 15-year-old son. The same son Paul tried to pin the murder on. Yeah, let's talk about that. The night Lauren DeWise was murdered, the children were asleep, according to Paul. He claimed he was home with all 3. But after a few interviews, that story didn't stick. Because his 15-year-old son, let's call him JD, told investigators something else. Something that would blow the case wide open. JD initially backed up Paul's alibi. But later, In a tearful interview, he broke. He said he'd gone with his dad that night. That he stayed downstairs. That he heard the shots. And the worst part? He didn't run. He didn't scream. Because trauma isn't loud. It's silent, heavy, paralyzing. And this 15-year-old kid? He was right in the middle of it. After Paul was arrested, Judge Holly Brown issued a no-contact order with any witnesses, including his children. But what does Paul do? He picks up a jail phone and calls his 17-year-old daughter the very next day. Pro move, right? On that call, Paul said this: "It's real important that JD admit it, because if he admits it, then I get the F out of here. Understand?" Let's repeat that. This grown man wanted his teenage son to confess to double attempted murder, of which was successful so he could walk free. Let that sink in. Paul tried to plant a story during that call. Looks to me like JD went twice, wore his own boots once, mine another time. He was basically crafting a narrative for his daughter to run with. "We'll take care of him," Paul added. "He'll only be in juvie till 21. The internet lost its mind over that line. What kind of father says that? Answer: one who's not afraid to sacrifice his own kid to save his own skin. Let's talk about reality now. 3 kids. Mother, dead. Father, in jail for murder. Now imagine being 17 and having your dad whisper in your ear that your little brother needs to take the fall. Or being 4 years old and wondering why mommy isn't coming home, why everyone's crying. Or 15, knowing you were there. That you saw it happen. That you couldn't stop it. This isn't a movie. There's no dramatic music. Just silence, therapy, endless questions. CPS got involved, fast. All 3 kids were separated for a while during the investigation. The 17-year-old stayed with a close family friend. The 4-year-old went into temporary foster care until a relative stepped in. And JD? He was placed in a trauma recovery facility for minors. There were rumors that some family members didn't believe the kids, thought Paul was innocent, said JD was confused or pressured by the police. You want to talk about betrayal? Try being 15, finally telling the truth, and your own blood doesn't believe you. Sources close to the family say all 3 kids are now in long-term therapy. JD has been diagnosed with PTSD, insomnia, and dissociative episodes. The 17-year-old? Severe anxiety, panic attacks, and guilt. The 4-year-old doesn't speak much. She draws a lot of pictures. Many of them feature a monster with no face. Let that one settle in. At every hearing, the prosecution reminds the court, Paul didn't just take Lauren's life, he tore 3 young lives apart. And now, on top of deliberate homicide and attempted homicide, he's facing felony tampering with witnesses, specifically trying to manipulate his children. Gallatin County Judge John Brown didn't play around. Paul's bail? Stacked. $1 million for the murder. Another $1 million for tampering. And 0 contact with any victims or witnesses, including his kids. Good. The internet exploded after the jail call transcript went public. Paul DeWise didn't just try to kill 2 women. He tried to weaponize his children. He's not just a murderer, he's a manipulator. Another comment said, "There's a special place in hell for people who make their kids clean up their mess." Hard to agree. This story's heavy. But it's not without light. Because JD spoke up. Because the 17-year-old didn't cover for her dad. Because a 4-year-old, even in silence, still finds ways to process her world. These kids? They're still standing, still breathing, still healing. When people say kids are resilient, they usually mean they'll forget. But not these kids. They won't forget. They'll carry this for the rest of their lives. But they're not just victims, they're survivors. And someday, they'll tell their side. And when they do, it'll shake the world. Alright, let's talk about the big moment in every courtroom drama. The defense. Because after all the evidence, after the kids, the phone calls, the blood, and the boots, Paul still had something to say. Or rather, his lawyer did. You ready for this? Paul's defense attorney, Alex Jacoby, came in swinging. Claimed there was no physical evidence tying Paul to the shooting. No DNA, no fingerprints, no gunshot residue. Just a shaky witness statement from a traumatized 15-year-old boy. The defense argued, "This isn't justice, this is a witch hunt." Yeah, real original. Jacoby painted Paul as a devoted father. Said he spent the night of the shooting at home watching movies with his 3 kids, but prosecutors destroyed that timeline. Because Paul's own cell phone betrayed him, records showed he was on the move during the estimated time of the shooting. And JD? His statement lined up with those timestamps. He didn't just say, "Dad left." The phone proved it. So much for that alibi. Let's not forget the jailhouse call that earned Paul that felony witness tampering charge. Jacoby argued the call was misinterpreted, that Paul was distraught, maybe delusional, and didn't intend to manipulate anyone. But the transcript? Let's pull up a highlight reel. It's real important he admit it. You can't spin that. Even if Paul was upset, that's not a slip of the tongue. That's a full-on strategy session with his teenage daughter. The defense tried floating a wild theory. That JD might have snuck out after everyone went to bed. Twice. Once in his boots, once in his dad's boots. Paul had hinted at it on the jail call, and Jacoby ran with it. He even brought up the mud pattern found on the boots and tried to match it to the crime scene. But there was one huge problem. The boots? They didn't match any of the bloody footprints at the scene. Zero correlation. The jury wasn't buying it. Neither was the prosecution. Jacoby brought in character witnesses, old friends, a co-worker or two. They said Paul was kind, family-focused, never violent. But prosecutors had receipts. They brought up texts from Lauren to friends pleading for help. Messages like, "If something happens to me, it's Paul." Yeah, that's not something you write about a guy who just forgets anniversaries. Prosecutors also called on Lauren's co-workers, who testified that she came in with bruises on multiple occasions. So much for non-violent. Now here's something important. The actual murder weapon was never found. And the defense jumped on that. Jacoby claimed that with no gun, no DNA, and no video, the case was circumstantial. But prosecutors didn't need a smoking gun. They had a trail of actions, a pattern of abuse, a motive, a timeline, and a confession attempt. Murder cases have been won on far less. Every trial has one dramatic question. Will the defendant take the stand? In Paul's case, Jacoby was hesitant. Because let's face it, one wrong word, and Paul could bury himself. But Paul? He insisted. He got up there, looked the jury in the eyes, and told his version. He said he loved Lauren, that he never hurt her, that he was being framed. He even cried. For a moment, the room was silent, but then the cross-examination began. Eric Kitzmiller, the lead prosecutor, stood up and lit Paul up like a Christmas tree. "Mr. DeWise, did you ask your daughter to tell your son to confess?" "No, I was misheard. It's recorded, word for word." Paul hesitated. "I didn't mean it like that." "What did you mean when you said, 'I get the F out of here if he admits it'?" Dead silence. The jury didn't need any more convincing. Jacoby's closing was all about doubt. If there's doubt, you must acquit. Classic move. But Kitzmiller hit back harder. He walked the jury through everything. The history of abuse, the text from Lauren, the son's statement, the jail call, the lies. Then he looked them in the eyes and said, "Paul DeWise didn't just kill a woman. He tried to bury the truth using his own children as shovels." Boom, mic drop. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. People waited outside. Family, media, random townsfolk. Everyone had their own theory. Then, the verdict. Guilty of deliberate homicide. Guilty of attempted deliberate homicide. Guilty of felony witness tampering. Paul didn't flinch. But the courtroom? Gasps, tears, nods. Justice had spoken. Paul's lies were slick, polished, practiced. But the truth? It's stubborn. It leaks through cracks. In a son's voice. In a daughter's eyes. In a call you never thought would be recorded. Paul thought he was smarter than the system. Turns out, he wasn't even smarter than his own phone. Alright, buckle up, because sentencing day wasn't just about numbers. It was about accountability. About a community watching a man finally get what he tried so hard to run from. And Paul? He was about to hear every word. The 24th of April, Gallatin County District Court. Paul DeWise stood before the same judge who had denied him bail. But this time, there was no running. The courtroom was full. Packed with reporters, lawyers, and family members, some there to support, some to confront. Paul wore an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles. And for once, he looked small. Before the judge spoke, the victims' families were given the floor. Lauren's sister stood up first. She gripped the podium, took a deep breath, and then unloaded. "You didn't just take Lauren from us. You took her from her kids. You left them broken. You ruined their birthdays, their holidays, their future." Then came Ashley Van Hemmert's mother. Her voice shook. "My daughter can't sleep. She can't work. She flinches at loud noises. You tried to kill her, but you didn't win. She's stronger than you." And finally, Lauren's teenage daughter asked to read a letter. Yeah, the same one Paul had tried to manipulate over the phone. Her voice was quiet, but every word cut like a blade. "You told me to lie, to protect you, but I saw through it. Mom was scared of you, and now I see why." You could hear a pin drop. Then came Paul's chance to speak. He stood up, looked at the judge, then glanced toward his kids. I made mistakes. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I loved Lauren. I love my kids. I never wanted this. But here's the thing. There were no apologies, no real ownership. Just deflection, vague regret. You could feel the frustration in the room, because this wasn't closure, it was damage control. Judge Holly Brown didn't hold back. She looked straight at Paul and said, "Mr. DeWise, this court sees a man who manipulated his family, traumatized his children, and destroyed lives. Your actions were premeditated, calculated, and cowardly." She paused, looked over at the gallery, then turned back and dropped the sentence like a bomb. "For the crime of deliberate homicide, this court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the crime of attempted deliberate homicide, an additional 50 years. And for witness tampering, 20 years still run consecutively. You do the math. That's 170 years." Paul blinked. Didn't flinch, didn't cry, but you could see the air leave his lungs. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed. Lauren's family hugged. Ashley's mother cried tears of relief. The DA gave a short statement. "Justice was served today, but the wounds Paul left behind will take a lifetime to heal." And the kids? They walked out hand in hand, still together, still standing. That's strength. Paul DeWise thought he could twist reality. He thought he could pin the crime on his own son. Thought he could manipulate his daughter. Thought the courts would buy it. But the truth? It doesn't bend. It doesn't play favorites. And no matter how smart you think you are, it always comes for you. So, Paul DeWise is locked away. 170 years. No parole. Game over, right? Well, not quite. Because while Paul faded into the prison system, the people he hurt, they were left to pick up the pieces. It's about the fallout, the wreckage, the healing, and the aftershocks that still echo through Belgrade today. Let's start with the most heartbreaking part of all, the kids. Paul and Lauren had 3 children. 2 daughters ages 17 and 4 and a 15-year-old son. The same kids who were in the house when it all went down. The same kids Paul tried to manipulate from jail. Yeah, them. After the sentencing, they were placed into the care of relatives. Thankfully, people who truly loved them. But trauma doesn't just vanish with a new guardian. The teenage daughter struggled with depression. She had trusted her father defended him until she heard that prison phone call. That betrayal? It broke her. Her younger sister kept asking when mommy was coming home. And the 15-year-old son? He needed therapy. Lots of it. For witnessing the murders. For being used as a scapegoat. For thinking, even for a second, that it was his fault. Ashley Van Hemert lived. But survival? That's only the first chapter. She had multiple surgeries, physical therapy, nightmares that left her gasping in the dark. At one point, she told a reporter, "I don't remember the sound of the gunshot, but I remember the silence afterward." Like the world stopped. She moved away from Belgrade for a while, needed space, distance, but she didn't disappear. Ashley started a blog, wrote openly about PTSD, about surviving domestic violence, about learning to feel safe again. And slowly, very slowly, she began to rebuild. You know what happens when a murder rocks town? It stays in the DNA. People in Belgrade still remember the 7th of January, still remember the headlines, the chaos, the disbelief. But they also remember Lauren. Friends organized a candlelight vigil every year on the anniversary of her death. They set up a scholarship in her name at the local high school one that supports students escaping domestic abuse. There's even a mural downtown with her favorite quote, "You never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have." That's legacy. And what about Paul? Well, he's inmate. Locked away in Montana State Prison. No parole, no visitors allowed to speak about the case, no access to his kids. Rumors say he spends most of his time alone. Some say he writes letters that never get mailed. Others say he still insists he's innocent. But none of it matters now. Because while he sits in a cold, gray cell every one else is moving forward. Without him, here's the thing. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call. Lauren had been trying to escape. She was making moves. She was getting help, but the system wasn't fast enough. Now, Montana lawmakers have been pushing for stricter protection laws, faster restraining orders, more accessible shelters for women and children. It's not perfect, but it's something. And stories like Lauren's, they keep the conversation alive. Look, stories like this? They hurt, they haunt, but they also matter. Because every name, every face, every broken piece of this story, it's a reminder. A reminder that evil doesn't always come in the form of a stranger in the dark. Sometimes, it wears a familiar face, smiles at the dinner table, pretends to love. And when that mask slips, the fallout is nuclear. You've heard about murder, manipulation, trauma, survival, and justice. So now, let's slow it down. Because this last part, it's not about Paul. It's about why we tell these stories in the first place. Let's go deep. This story wasn't fiction. It wasn't a movie script. It happened in a quiet neighborhood, to a real woman, with real kids, to a town that never thought it'd be in the headlines. And that's the thing. When we cover stories like this, it's not just for the drama or the courtroom twist. It's to put a spotlight on what happens when society looks the other way. Lauren was a mother, a friend, a woman trying to escape abuse. She did everything right. She reached out, she moved away, she filed for divorce. But sometimes, even that isn't enough. Paul DeWise wasn't a monster in the shadows. He was a dad, a husband, a man who probably waved at neighbors and paid his bills. But behind that polite smile, there was control, obsession, violence. You see, some of the most dangerous people in the world don't look dangerous. They wear wedding rings. They eat dinner with their kids. They go to work like everyone else. And that's why stories like this need to be told, so people can recognize the red flags before it's too late. Ashley Van Hemert could have died, easily, but she didn't. She survived, and she chose not to disappear. You know how hard that is? To not let your trauma define you? To stand up and talk about it? Survivors like Ashley aren't lucky. They're strong, and by speaking out, she made sure Lauren didn't die in silence. The hardest part of this story? The kids. Because they didn't choose any of this. They didn't ask to be pawns in a deadly game. But they're still here, still healing. And we don't know how their story ends. But we do know this. They've already shown more strength than most adults ever will. And if this story has any hope in it, it's in them. Look, true crime can be messy, disturbing, dark, but it's also real. And behind every headline is a heartbeat, a family, a story that deserves to be remembered with dignity, not just sensationalized for clicks. Lauren's story deserved to be told right. So did Ashley's. So do the kids. So do all the people who didn't make it out. Paul DeWise thought he could rewrite the narrative. He thought he could manipulate his way out of murder, blame his own son, guilt-trip his daughter, lie his way through a trial. But the truth? It has a way of surviving, even when the people who tell it don't. Lauren DeWise won't be forgotten. Ashley Van Hemert lived to tell the tale. And the next time someone sees the red flags, maybe they'll speak up, maybe they'll get out, maybe this story will save a life. And if it does, then it was worth telling. This has been Mystery Unveiled. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember sometimes, the scariest monsters wear no mask at all.